And we are rolling. So, by the way, I'll just let y'all know. Gotcha. But anyway, I want to let the audience know that's listening to this that you're not just some random person we found to say, hey, come tell us your story that kind of almost ruined your life. This is my co-host Brad's wife. I consider her a very lucky woman to be able to claim that title as Brad's wife. But seriously, she's got one hell of a story, and we're about to get into it.
And it's good to be back in the studio. It's been a while. Great. It's good to be back in the studio. I'm glad to have my wife and the courage that she has to come up and tell this story, and she's been doing it for years. Yeah. And I'm glad to have you, Kristen, to sit here and listen to it. I hope it gets out to people, and like we've always said, if we just can save or help.
Yeah.
One person.
Well, it sounds cliche, but it's true. Absolutely. If one person gets anything positive out of this, then I feel like it was worth us coming in here and doing this.
And that's why we're here.
Anybody who's watched any of our stuff is probably wondering, what is this lady sitting there doing with these knuckleheads? Because it's not typically the stuff that we do. We're usually in here goofing off and playing around, but I thought this was very, it's a very serious issue that goes on in this country from what I understand. And it needs to be discussed and talked about, and hopefully it'll help somebody.
Yes, but, absolutely.
Now, you're basically an advocate now for sexual assault survivors. And what happened to you? What was it, 1984, I think, from what I read? 17 years old?
I was 17. It was just before my high school graduation.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Pre-assault, how would you describe the teenage Angela? I mean, were you outgoing? What? So,
I was outgoing, although I didn't have, I had very young parents. And they were very strict. When I say young, my mom is only 17 years older than me. So it wasn't like I had the neighborhood house where everybody kind of came and went and guys hung out, girls hung out. My mom and dad were just not into that.
Okay.
So when it came to like football players and talking to guys, I felt like I was probably a little naive and inexperienced.
I got you. Because you weren't, like your parents didn't really have you in that element. So
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I was wondering. And my point to that, because I want people to see how that changes someone as a person. That's why I was asking you if you could describe yourself before, were you, outgoing, happy-go-lucky type teen? Yeah. I mean, just pretty much normal like teen, what they would say?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I had to describe my relationship with my dad, who was a full-blooded Italian, and I was his only daughter, firstborn, and I think no one taught him to make sure that his daughter felt confident throughout her life.
Okay.
I probably didn't learn to be confident at 5. Mm-hmm. We didn't go around, my parents didn't go around reminding me to say my affirmations like we do now. And so in a bar setting, I was probably the least confident or self-assured person.
I got you.
So having a dad being in your life and helping you find confidence and being able to open up and talk to him. There was this fear, I think.
Yeah, it seems like it would make you less prone to being taken advantage of.
Exactly.
If,
and that's what happened.
Yeah. It makes sense. Now, real quick, like I said, we're not gonna stay long on the actual assault, but just walk us and the audience through what exactly took place that night that changed your life forever.
So it was a Sunday night, which was a school night, and I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and on the off chance that I could go to a birthday party, even though I knew that the birthday party was going to be in the French Quarter, my neighborhood friend invited me. She was a couple of years older than I was, and she had already graduated, and I asked my parents. I had just handed in my term paper on Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and it was long and drawn out, and so they let me go to this birthday party, and I was careful about what I wore. My friend Susie said, make sure you dress appropriately, like maturely, so that you can get in the bar.
Oh, I got you.
And so I wore a tailored blouse, corduroy pants that, believe me, they were not skinny jeans.
Right.
And at 97 pounds, they probably fit me like the best they could. And so I tell you that. And I also wore like a little heel. And they weren't stiletto type, believe me. They were, modest. And so here I was dressed like that. And I'm telling you that so that it completely dispels the myth that women are assaulted because of what they wear.
I was going to ask you how that makes you feel when you hear that, you know, because a lot of people will, like you said, victim blaming, like she shouldn't have been wearing that. But
what was she wearing? It doesn't matter.
Right. It shouldn't matter. But in your case, you're saying it was nothing that would have even given off, like I'm here for the taking or whatever,
And like I said, by the time we left pretty early because my parents thought that this birthday party was not far from our house. And so we left at like 4 o'clock. My curfew was 10. And I remember driving down there to the French Quarter thinking, oh my God, remember that song, Jump?
Oh, yeah. Van Halen.
It was on repeat. It was the
top 100 back in 84.
So, But I remember that song playing, and we parked down there. It was this gorgeous day. And so here I am walking in the French Quarter, scared that on Bourbon Street, if I looked, I would end up seeing somebody naked because they talk about all the bars and the strip clubs. Anyway, that didn't happen.
You were out of your element.
But I was naive. Yeah. And, here I was scared about who was going to be at the door once we got to the bar. And no one was there. It wasn't crowded. And I think because it was so early. It was only 4 o'clock. So we walk in, and I was a little nervous to order my drink because he did ask for my ID, and he took a double take because it was a fake ID. The drinking age back then was 18.
Right.
And so anyway, here we are. We met up with the birthday crowd at the bar, and we were standing around, and I'm sipping on my daiquiri when all of a sudden I see this group of jocks sitting at a table. And one of them was peering above his friend's head, looking my way.
Right.
And I thought, well, and I looked to my left, I looked to my right, because I thought, surely he's not looking at me, only to realize that he was.
Yeah.
And so that kept up. And the more he looked, the more he smiled, the faster I drank. I was
nerves.
Oh yeah, I was nervous.
Yeah.
And so eventually he made his way over towards me, and I remember being in complete awe of him. I can't think of any good-looking football players or quarterbacks or tight ends or whatever they were from 1984. I can't think of anybody, but I can only compare him to poor Tom Brady.
I got you.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now these guys, they were older than...
Yes. Okay. Like you knew they were in college. Okay. I could see the Tulane logo on their sweatshirts or whatever they had on. And so he takes me by the hand over to his table. And so here I sat isolated from my friends. And I'm in the company of these big guys. One is as big as the other. And I can't recall the details of the conversation that I had with them. But I told my Mr. Handsome that I had to be home by 10. And so I said I have to leave at 9:30. And he offered to bring me home. But I remember being in awe. And that's where I talk about the confidence that I needed validation of only myself and not from some big guy looking at me. I wish, going back then, if I'd known then what I know now. But I didn't have that. And I think the alcohol certainly softened some of that and made me a little more vulnerable. And so my friend, I don't think she was happy about me leaving with them.
Right.
But she wasn't ready to leave the bar either. So I stood up and everything went numb. The music, the bar was all of a sudden very crowded. People were everywhere in the bar. And he took me by the hand, Mr. Handsome, and ushered me out the door onto Bourbon Street. And I don't really remember the details of walking to the car, but I knew I made a mistake when I got in their car because I kept rationalizing. And I remember thinking, surely they're from this esteemed university.
Right.
They probably come from good families, and surely I'll be okay.
You're trying to convince yourself.
He offered to bring me home.
Yeah.
Obviously, he wants to get to know me better and ask for my phone number. These were all the things that my 17-year-old brain could imagine. And so I get in the car, and they made me sit in between two of his friends, and Mr. Handsome drove, and another of his friend was in the front seat. And the guy to my right kept pestering me, and I remember telling Mr. Handsome to ask him to stop, and that was the last thing I remembered.
Damn.
I think I passed out at that point.
Yeah. So you were they definitely put something in your. So I know you said you think.
Well, back then, Shane, we didn't worry about our drinks.
Right.
So I'm sure that I left my drink at the table when I did get up to go to the bathroom.
Of course.
Because we didn't worry about that back then.
Well, it still happens nowadays. So I can imagine back then. And I want to say, what was it, like roofies or something they called it back then or something like that. But yeah, it supposedly it was going around a lot back in those, in those days in the 80s and all. So I have no doubt. Wasn't there. We can't prove that, but I have no doubt. I mean, for something to hit you like that,
Right.
So that's where it started. And then what do you remember next out of any of that mess?
Well, my next memory wasn't a good one.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much time had passed until I realized that there was a clock on the wall and it said 10 minutes to 2 a.m.
Oh, damn.
So I was way past my curfew.
Of course.
But I opened my eyes, which were so heavy from the weight of the alcohol, and I could hear some chatter and some laughing. I felt pain. I realized that I'm under these bright fluorescent lights. I'm on a cold dorm room bed, and they had removed most of my clothes. And someone I had never met before was raping me. Oof. I picked up my head and I was silent. I don't know. I did not know what to say. It was like I went into this spawning type mechanism where I just, like I said, I froze, and I look in the distance and I realized that another one was standing naked, waiting his turn, fully prepared, waiting his turn, which at 17, I hadn't seen much of the male body part. So to see more than one in my line of fire was traumatizing. It took a while for me to process that.
It's just sad to think that someone at that age dealing with that, like you said, you don't know what to do. You freeze up. And was there anybody that any recollection of anybody trying to stop this nonsense?
Not a person. Yeah. So I realized that the room was full of football players sitting on, I think I know now that was a desk. And they were scattered on the desk. Some were standing. And no one did anything to stand up for me or I did hear, as I laid there, I think they waited for me to fully wake up, like they were trying to see if I was going to fall back asleep.
Sure.
But I was awake now.
Yeah.
And I heard a voice say, "That's enough." And they fled. The three that remained, I know now that was 3 of those perpetrators from the bar. And having to stand and get dressed in front of them was, it caused a lifetime of self-consciousness. You know?
Yeah, I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I was thinking that,
I mean, they went through the trouble of taking my clothes off. They were, so here I was doing that. And then they stood huddled in a corner as though they knew they were pieces of shit.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They stood in the corner and waited and watched as I crawled on the floor on my hands and knees, desperately looking for one of my shoes. And in that moment, I could not have been more humiliated and degraded.
Of course. You're alone.
I know. When I stood to leave, I was in shock and silent still. Couldn't say anything to them except I needed to go home. And that's when the 3 that were left said, well, we'll bring you. And all I could think is that here I am, standing inside this college dorm. I'm disheveled. I am without a shoe. I am 5 hours past my curfew. The rest of the world was home sleeping, safe and warm in their beds, and I had to be at school in a matter of hours.
And this is going through your young mind of what just happened to you, and you're
like it was so isolating. It was so isolating. Like somebody had dropped me off on an icy mountaintop with no resources, and no shoes. And so the shoe is important because later on you're going to see just what happened with the shoe. Anyway.
So what was the, it was 3 guys that brought you home?
Yeah.
Was there any conversation at all in the car?
Not a word.
Nothing.
I mean, I was giving them directions.
But
go here, take a left, that kind of thing.
I think they knew they screwed up.
But I felt like my mind was screaming at the thought of how they were able to view and touch my bare body while I slept.
Unconscious.
Yeah. And what had they done to me before I woke up?
Sure. Yeah, you haven't. So all this is...
I still will not ever really know the full... Little did I know that the next day these awful bruises would emerge on my thighs, which pretty much told me what I didn't know.
Right.
So
you had to go to school the next day?
I had to go to school the next day. My parents, when we pulled up, there I was, disheveled. I'm barefoot, holding only one shoe, as my dad was waiting outside. He's charging towards the car as I'm trying to walk up the driveway, and they sped away. And my last memory of that is my dad trying to run towards their car. And at that time, it was about 3:00 in the morning. And I had to get up for school at 6:00. The bell rang at 7. So I walked in. No, back up. So I remember vaguely my mom and dad asking me that night, are you okay? And I kept saying, I'm fine. Nothing happened. That's all I remember of that. And I cried myself to sleep. I remember that.
Can I ask you something, though, just about the parents? What stopped you from right then and there saying what these guys had did? And I'm just trying to get into the mind of a victim, because it happens a lot where they don't want to speak out, especially to parents. So what causes that?
There is something so silencing about multiple offender rape. I went into an act of self-preservation.
Do you think some of the young ladies that find themselves in those positions, they're afraid to maybe, is it getting in trouble, or is it, what? Because I'm sure there's multiple reasons why some women choose not to just right away say, hey, this is what happened.
I think it's a form of embarrassment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Big word. Yeah. A shame just to tell your parents what. Yeah. You start blaming yourself. I would
being
imagine.
Blamed for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I drank alcohol, and that was, to me, that was that was it.
That was it.
That
so
was
in your
my
mind,
demise.
I shouldn't have. Yeah, it was never once
if I
that
wouldn't have drank, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, instead of these assholes should have never done that. It was all on you. You know, basically in your mind.
Exactly.
From there, I guess you just, I mean, would you just go to school? The rest of this just normal?
So it wasn't a normal day. No, I went looking very, I looked like I was sick. I don't remember if I drove, I had my own car, or if my mom or dad brought me to school. I don't remember that. I know I was late, and my best friend sat next to me in my class, and right away, I asked her the night before if she could go out, and her mom and dad told her no. So she said, "What happened?" And I kind of mouthed to her what happened. And the last thing I can see her saying to me was, "They were naked." Like, and in our 17-year-old brains, we just let it go. And like she says now, I wish I would have gone to somebody. And she said, I thought I was protecting you by not saying anything to anyone. And
well, you start judging it from an adult mind, you know, but at 17,
she's mom and grandmother and
of
course.
God. Now, you basically lived with this secret over 34 years. That is a long time, girl.
34 years.
That is a long
34 years without saying anything?
Yeah. Never told a soul.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had good times and bad. Like, you know, it definitely affected me when I chose a lifetime of shame, of secrecy.
Right.
You know, that it also included times of darkness.
Yeah.
Where I couldn't find the light. You know, I couldn't, you know, I had failing relationships, you know, poor boundaries.
And that's kind of what I was getting at the beginning of just, you know, you pre this traumatic episode to how it changed you as a person in these 34 years of just living in this torment. I mean, was there a day that went by that it didn't cross your mind?
There were probably days
some good days
when I tucked it really good and far down deep. You know, I would have triggers.
Right.
You know, anytime I heard the word Tulane or, you know.
God, I couldn't imagine living with that. I didn't even think about that. Just seeing the and you hear it in Louisiana all the time. It's everywhere. I mean, the school's name and all. So and
I didn't know how to define it. Like, I knew what happened to me was unnatural.
Right.
But when it came to things like that term gang rape, you hear about that, but it was always people were attacked in an alley, and that's who that happened to. Stranger danger, and I just couldn't associate that.
Yeah.
And so it didn't come. I found the light that would change things in 2018.
So what brought you to the point to say that was
that was definitely a pivotal moment. Here I was functioning as an RN, busy, living my life. I came home one night, and Brad and I were, after dinner, we were watching the news, and I overhear the word train rape.
Okay.
And so here I am, not thinking that I would ever say anything.
And if I can interject, this was during the time of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And this is, so this is where it's leading up.
So you're hearing a lot about it, in other words.
Right.
It's all over the news.
It's all over the news, right.
But I still knew that I would never say anything.
Okay.
Even though we were hearing about Me Too and we were hearing all this, and I knew that I was part of that, but yet I knew that I couldn't find it within me to tell anybody still. And until they said the word train rape, well, I realized that is exactly what they were doing to me. And I froze. And in that moment, it was like I could see her there. The girl that was 17-year-old, once me. And it was like she was standing in that same disheveled, barefoot silence. Like she was looking at me, and my mind's eye could see her there. It was like she was waiting for me to stand up for her. Damn. And so I threw my dish towel over my shoulder, and left the faucet with soapy hands, and I'm looking for the remote, and I'm trying to turn the TV off so that I could shout to him that I wanted his attention. And that's what happened to me. And all I remember is him rising out of his chair. And in that moment, I knew everything had changed.
But you had said it at that point that
that is what happened to me.
And what did you think hearing that? Were you like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
of course. Yeah. Stood up and explain.
Yeah.
Let's hear it. And that was just and I guess it was like the opening of Pandora's box.
Sure.
And I think from that day on, right, it was that I'm going to find these motherfuckers.
I was going to ask you.
I'm going to do what we got to do. And, all ends of the earth, and because here we go, it's 34 years. A lot of time has passed. She doesn't remember. I mean, she remembers vague things, if it's the blonde hair or the cheekbone or whatever it might be, or the eyes, I think was a big thing. But yeah, from that day on, it was Pandora's box was opened, and it was like, it's on.
So I'm sure you have the natural just emotion of anger hearing that.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, how did you feel getting that out for the first time?
Okay, so I felt like I can do this. Suddenly I felt empowered. And I think it was the stories of other survivors that gave me that empowerment. And I kept going. And I remember that night Brad was pacing in the house. And I, like a teenager, I went and sat on the edge of my bed. And he walks in the room and he says, your parents can never know. Because I think he knew, here, my parents are aging now.
Sure.
They're 70 and 72 at the time. And he said, they can never know.
Right.
And I said, I don't want them to know. But I want Tulane to know. I felt like their schools should know what happened to a high school girl on their campus, regardless of how historic it was.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Doesn't excuse it. Yeah.
And I found the courage to call Tulane and let them know.
What do you? How do you even start that conversation off with them?
Okay, so that was really awkward.
I'm sure.
Because when I said the year, I had to repeat 1984. And the detective that I got was so kind and helpful.
Now, this was Tulane Police Department.
Okay. So law enforcement on the campus.
This was Tulane's law enforcement.
He did tell me that I had the right to. There was nothing else he could do because the statute of limitations had long passed. Administrations have changed over many times, and I said, I just want, it feels good that and this is documented. This is validating for me. And I hung up, and 2 days later, I found the courage to call NOPD, which was a completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
What is the statute of limitations in Louisiana?
So 1984, it's called simple rape. Multiple offenders didn't happen until 1985.
Okay.
Where I think they knew it was happening around the state. I mean, everywhere it was happening.
Right.
These train rapes or
date rapes
multiple offender rapes. And so they changed the law in 1985.
Yeah, was that prevalent?
A year later.
It was going on like that they had to start changing laws about it?
Yeah, it went from 1984 of being simple rape. The statute is probably just a little paragraph long, as opposed to 1985, where it includes multiple offenders, where they have to. And look, I don't know that I would have gotten justice back then.
Right.
Like they would have had to prove that they all acted in concert, and that would have been probably hard to do, And I'm a realist. I get that, but and I don't know how my life would have been had I reported back then. I really don't. I don't know what would have came of any of it. I kind of regret it. I regret not telling anybody because I robbed. Now that's the me now, the 50-something-year-old me.
Yeah.
Because I robbed myself of seeking medical care back then. I went to bed that night and didn't dealt with 2 weeks of bruising, but what about everything else that I should have been checked for? And the mental health. My life would have been better served had I sought help back then.
You besides mentioning it to your friend in class, that was the only time that was the last time y'all had really.
That we never talked about it again.
Wow.
And then just the phobias of, her and I, we still talk about it, and just the phobias she had of never, ever wanting to step on a college campus or a dorm room, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that just kind of it changed her trajectory in life on college, and so it was anything that she ever did with school it just took 3 times longer. And when she decided to do it, because now she had a child and she had a job, and so it took a lot longer. So it changed everything in her life.
I didn't become a nurse, an RN, until I was 42.
Right.
Yeah. It took me a while to figure things out.
Oh, I'm sure. With that on your mind, I mean, that's a traumatizing event. Now, you eventually, did you reach out to some sort of group? Because I know you're involved now with.
Yes. When I called NOPD, he sent me, and I remember telling my detective on the phone, I told him, you were probably in diapers, because I felt like I had to defend myself. It was in the middle of the Me Too stuff, and I thought, okay, she's telling me this is 1984. I can just see it now.
Right.
Like, I was totally wasting his time. Yeah. Like, the statute of limitations is over, and do I really have to do this? This is, and that's how I acted, And I said, you were in diapers when this happened to me, probably. And I'm not just part of the Me Too movement. Like, I got kind of...
Yeah, you were defensive.
Yeah, I was a little offensive. And defensive, whatever, both. And he said, when he asked me the names of my perpetrators, I had this sinking feeling, and I just couldn't believe it. The humiliation started all over again because I didn't have their names. And I said, but I want to find them. And he said, it's unlikely that you ever will. I said, but I have some semblance of their facial features and hair color. And so I kept trying to explain that to him. Well, when we hung up, he said, I'm going to send you a list of resources. And he sent me to STAR, and the acronym Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. Okay. They're in the state of Louisiana. Baton Rouge is their flagship location. And then there's New Orleans, and then another one in Alexandria maybe. But they were instrumental in, because I felt so raw after the disclosure to my husband and to the police. I didn't know how to get from point A to point B.
Right.
I was stuck. And so it's a very lonely and isolating feeling.
I can imagine. My God.
And so I turned to the resources with STAR, and I went to counseling. And Brad decided we would hire a private investigator. And that proved good and bad. I think what they wanted, because they were former law enforcement, and I had to go and sit and meet with them and Brad. And I remember asking or telling them the details, and I think you probably sense it too, how raw and vulnerable I was. Like,
Were you opposed to the idea at all at first of the private finding these?
I wanted them to help me find them. They had me draw a layout of the dorm, and I drew it to a T. I would find that in the yearbook, in a 2-lane yearbook, about 6 months later.
I found of what you drew?
The exact, yes. So everything that I had explained to the detectives all started coming back over 6 months. I signed on at e-yearbook, and I perused that e-yearbook every day for 6 months, looking I think one of the hardest things that I went through, Shane, I was looking for their features, and I found these two men in the yearbook, that were not them. And that was a sad part of this story, is that men can be falsely accused. Sure. And I was only going by the looks. And it turns out they were the doppelgangers of two of these guys. And that too would be proven later.
But you had told the detectives or whoever that... I
told the detectives.
Right, I got you.
And one of them, the detectives actually drove to where one of them lives in Mississippi. And they both lived in Mississippi, both the men. One of them I called. I ordered one of those databases, where you can find out anybody, a truth finder or whatever. And because with that in the yearbook, I had their names. And I said, this is them. This is what they look like. And my detectives went there, and they said he wasn't there at the university, because he was coaching at a university. And they said he wasn't coaching that day, but we left him our card. And then, me being Miss Resourceful, I decided to call him myself. And I could not have been any more wrong. And I cried over that. When I found my perpetrators, I sent that man an email, and it's gut-wrenching, the things I said to him.
And were you like accusing him before you found, like, were you like...
I just said, I know you were there.
Oh, wow. But in your mind, you do think, to justify that.
I was looking for somebody that looked like him.
Right.
But it wasn't him.
Poor guy.
Yeah, it's just accused.
But it's not your, it's not like you did anything wrong or malicious,
Imagine what he went through,
Yeah.
And then the other one with the head of dark hair, I called him as well. And it happened to be the very night that I found my perpetrator, Mr. Handsome.
Okay.
And who explained everything in detail to me. So that night, it was important to me. I sent a text to the poor guy.
Well, let's step back a minute. Yeah, I want to step back a minute on this, because, and that's right, because of the would-be thought person that was in Mississippi. Actually, didn't he send you an email back saying, I'm sorry for what happened. I hope that you find justice?
So the one in Biloxi said that to me.
Yes.
I think they both may have said that. I hope you get peace or justice, or, yeah, they did say something along those lines. But be clear, do not reach out to me again.
Oh, damn.
I had nothing to do with what happened to you.
Yeah.
And
you almost can't blame them for that reaction, because in their mind, they're like, I know this woman thinks I did this horrible act, and bless your heart, you're thinking it's the guys that did it.
In his defense, he's a guy who's married.
Yeah, his kids. His wife's probably like, what in the hell?
Grandkids.
Grandkids, and like, what the hell is going on here,
So what led to you finding the real perpetrator? How did you...
So, the purpose of the private investigators, they wanted the New Orleans Police Department to upgrade to aggravated circumstances, which would give it no statute of limitations.
Right.
And so they did a report, which they gave to NOPD, but still, they were not able to find anything. They used their resources to see if they could find anybody that were football players back then. It just seemed like it was going nowhere.
Well, and honestly, how hard do you think they were trying to?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, on a Saturday morning, I'm sitting in my sunroom and again looking at the Tulane yearbook, going over all these, when it occurred to me that football teams have programs. And so I go to eBay and I put in Tulane football 1980 I put in 83, 84, 85, and they all popped up. And so I ordered them. So a week later, they were delivered. And here I was. It was 6 months after I reported, looking at Mr. Handsome in the book.
Because you thought about
what is a program?
I was going to explain.
A football program? Mm-hmm. It's just every football game. They have all of their pictures in the program, their positions, and
it'd be like a little booklet you get when you go to the game,
yeah.
you know, and
But these were dated back 1983 and 84, and that's how I found him. And I was right. It was that set of eyes that I kept seeing peer above his friend's head. And there they were. So you
recognize it right away.
Over 34 years, I never forgot them. There are things about that night that are as vivid in my mind as this room is here to me. Like I can...
Things you'll never forget, I'm sure.
You can't unsee it, you know. And so it took about a week because I went through that same search engine and I looked him up. But I'm looking at his name and I remember that them telling me that night that they were from Baton Rouge. And I remembered, you know, like, oh my God, all this time they were right there. I thought maybe they lived all over the country. I didn't know what to think. Have I crossed paths with them in some way? You know, but there they were in Baton Rouge. And so I got this phone number from Mr. Handsome, and I kept calling it. And then I took a picture of me in my yearbook, the Chappelle yearbook from 1984, and I looked exactly like that. And so I screenshot it and just sent the picture. And on the bottom, I put winter 1984 with just my face. And he responded back 40 minutes later and said, I know you.
Wow.
He told me everything that I had explained to the police departments. We took you to my dorm at Tulane.
He admitted it?
Mm-hmm. I asked who put the bruising on my thighs, and he texted me back their names.
Holy shit. And what do you think the reason for him doing that was?
Well, what I could gather, because, you know, with Facebook, that was another thing. So back then, we didn't have cameras. I didn't have any of that to worry about. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have all the social media platforms for me to be exposed. Mm-hmm. But yet I exposed them when I went on this crusade. And you did too. Them. Yeah. I used Facebook to my advantage. Yes. And I can surmise that he was an alcoholic, Mr. Handsome, just by some of the posts. So usually when people go through the 12-step programs, making amends to some of the people you hurt, and I can tell that by what he said back to me. I've had you in my mind forever.
How'd that make you feel?
I wasn't sure, you know, like, I'm glad that he didn't forget. They obviously knew that they made a mistake. Sure. And I found it to be a little ironic that they all had daughters.
Mm. Well, that'll make you think a different way also.
Yes.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
They all had daughters and had to endure, you know, like he said to me, you know, I don't know what I would do if somebody hurt my daughter. Yes. I'd want to kill him. And I thought, really?
Yeah.
You know? So I don't think they were living their best lives. He told me lots of things about, like, when I said that I went home disheveled and without a shoe, and he texts back, oh, we threw your shoe out a window, you know? And I remember being mad, like, that was my shoe. You know, it gave me balance. And I went a whole lot of my life with a sense of imbalance, you know? So, and And they had no right to do that.
None at all.
You know?
Was he the only one you actually made contact with?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So it gets, all right.
Oh, yeah. I kept going. So when he gave me the names, I found one of them on LinkedIn. I sent him a message on LinkedIn and I said, I know who you are. I know what you did to me. I'll never be able to forget it. And went on. It was like I wrote my impact statement to him, which is extremely cathartic. You know, something I would have never otherwise gotten to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went a step further. I drew the line at calling parents and children, but I called their sisters. One sister cried with me on the phone, and she said, "You've just explained my entire little brother's life to me." And we cried together on the phone.
Did you get any pushback from any of the relatives, like in a negative?
Mr. Handsome's estranged wife, because I called her and she was very ugly. And she said, how can this be bothering you now?
Really?
Yeah. And she said, I sure hope that you don't plan on pressing charges because all of them have daughters.
Wow.
And you don't need to go ruin the lives of their daughters and their families.
So the hell would happen to you?
But I wrote her an email back or a text message back or messenger or whatever it was. And I pretty much told her where she can go with that.
What a response. My God.
Wow. Isn't that crazy?
Disgusting.
Damn.
So, yeah, I did. I found all that out. Well, the thing was, with NOPD, I sent them all the copies of the text messaging. I sent everything to NOPD, and they forgot that it was 1984. So they start kind of getting this ball rolling. Yeah. And my detective is on the phone with me asking me, well, did you record your conversation with him? Because I did talk to him, Mr. Handsome, for a few minutes. And I said, no, I didn't think to do that. They were going to have a charge conference. And I was excited about that because at a charge conference, they meet with the DA's office. And the DA will usually tell them what they need to further advance their evidence and the whole bit in the case. And, but me being that nursey nurse, resourceful person, I said, I'm not just going to sit by and wait. I'm going to call the Supreme Court in New Orleans and get the rape statute. I want to see it for myself. So I speak to the law librarian and she sends me 1984 and 85. And I started to say, well, I don't need 85. And so here I am, I'm at home in my kitchen and over the printer comes the 1985 statute. And I'm like, okay. And then here comes 84. And it's like a paragraph. And I remember the detective telling me, we have to go by the year of the crime. And I kind of collapsed and thought, oh my God, I came this far. I found them. I got all this evidence, but yet it's over, you know? And so I sobbed to my detective and I told him, you know, I feel like I'm defeated, you know? And I had to find a new way to feel justified or to feel validated. And I think in the end, having their names and my crime documented is validation for me.
Sure.
Because it went 34 years without any acknowledgement. So I felt good in that.
And I would assume you're leaving him nameless on here on purpose. Because I know you're saying Mr. Handsome, but he has a name.
Yeah.
But I guess you're kind of skirting around that. So we'll leave that there. But
yeah, I'm not going to name them.
I got it.
No, I know that all four of them, because that was the thing. I learned that night when he said their names, And I said, I can't find them in the Tulane yearbook. And he said, no, they were my two friends that were staying with me. They all were football players at Baker High.
Oh, so they weren't.
In Baton Rouge, near Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that a high school?
And they look just like the two poor guys in the yearbook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like them.
Well, let's get to all the good work you're doing now. How did that come about? Like you getting, because I know you do conferences and speeches and.
So STAR, every year they have, it's called Champions for Change, and they honor legislators who make laws and, when it comes to sexual assault and abuse for children and lots of good things that they do, They're warriors in this whole thing. And they invited me to be their keynote speaker.
How did they know? Because you were.
What's that?
Like, how did they know that you were a victim of?
I was a client of STARS now, and they asked me to be the keynote, and that kind of changed everything. I came up with a speech, and I had my family there, and it was about 200 some odd people that consisted of law enforcement, a lot of attorneys, big donors.
The governor was there.
Yeah. Big donors to STAR, because it's all, they thrive off of funds, federal funding,
charity,
to provide free care to survivors. So it's amazing what they do.
And you're saying care, it'll be, I guess, psychiatric help or any.
I went to counseling
and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And my counselors were amazing, because there were times when I would sit there and I couldn't even formulate a sentence when it felt so raw, where do I go from here? But anyway, once I gathered the courage to speak that night, it empowered me to move on.
Yeah.
And I contacted RAIN, which is the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, which is huge. And they wanted speakers, their speakers bureau. And I applied, and I started speaking around the state to different universities. Northwestern State University here in Louisiana, Centenary College, Southeastern, lots of them. And it was, like I said, each and every time it was empowering.
Sure. Now, when you're speaking, are you going through your story, or is it mainly just look, I'm here to help, survivors?
No one really told me how to do it.
Sure.
So if I could go back and do a few of them, I probably would. But I wanted survivors to know that they're not alone, because I know that many people suffer in silence.
Absolutely.
And
and that's we'll probably never know the true amount of people that have been through what you've been through, because so many people are afraid, ashamed, embarrassed, all the names you can come up with, and why they don't speak out. That I don't think we'll ever truly know how many people are affected by that.
I think one of the eye openers for me is I started going to therapy independent of STAR, and right there in Abita Springs, and we had a support group, which was very coveted, and we had male survivors in there, and they were just as ordinary guys that you wouldn't think, but yet they were abused when they were young boys.
I was going to ask you if it was from childhood.
I mean,
because you don't hear about that a lot. Like, I would think it's predominantly
it's so underreported.
Yeah.
When it comes to men, boys.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I'm sure it's odds are it's going to be a woman that's being assaulted anyway by a man. It's just not typically something that a woman does. Now, I'm sure, I guess it could go on in the gay community too. Honestly, man on man type assault, that they have to deal with it. Yeah. Did the number of people that come to these seminars and these conferences that are victims, did it ever surprise you? Like, my God, there's that many people?
No, a lot of them at the universities are during what's called the red zone.
Yeah.
And, it's part of their orientation to listen to a guest speaker.
Yeah.
Incoming freshmen.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you've heard of numbers of victims, on average that go. I mean, did that ever, before you started digging into all that, you had no way to know. Now that you know the numbers of women that this happens to, did it ever just like, holy shit? Because I know I was reading a little bit and I'm like, good God.
1 in 4.
It is going on like that. And that's what we know of.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And a statistic, according to RAINN, every 68 seconds, another American is a victim of sexual violence. And sexual violence encompasses many things, from abuse to rape, assault, harassment, inappropriate touching. It's any unwanted sexual contact. And it's happening. It's pervasive in our communities.
It was promoted when I was young in movies. I mean,
right.
I remember, I don't know if y'all remember License to Drive. It had Corey Haim and Corey Feldman in it back when I was younger. And I remember one of the scenes when I was thinking about you and all of this, and they got a young lady that's drunk in the back seat of a car. And I think it was Corey Feldman at the time. He's opening her blouse and taking pictures, and everybody's laughing about it. Yeah. And I'm thinking, it's just not funny. Now, back then, we're all watching it like, oh, it's just boys being boys. But that is a form of sexual assault.
Another 80s movie, The 16 Candles.
Yeah,
same thing.
That's what I mean. It was almost promoted. I mean, I don't know if it was purposely done, but times were different back then where it was just guys being guys, and it's like, no, it's a young lady you're doing that to. Especially, I have that, I have my daughter, and so you start looking at that shit different, and then you start seeing the numbers of women that do come forward. And like I said, that's probably not even a piece of the pie when it comes to the ones that really, that happens.
And that's what's so important about Sexual Assault Awareness Month is it provides another platform for survivors, to know that they're not alone and find resources.
That's got to be major. Just women knowing that, okay, I'm not alone in this, because yourself, you probably felt like that for years, especially younger.
Absolutely.
Like, I have nobody I can talk to this about, So Absolutely. I can imagine that's a huge way for, people to kind of start getting over the trauma. I doubt you're ever over it, but at least it's a start,
Yeah. I don't think you ever get over it, but, those images and the flashbacks, they happen,
Triggers. Yeah.
Yeah. One time Brad said something about, he was talking about when they made tamales. And he said, well, we run a train and it came out of nowhere. Yeah. And it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 years ago. But it's little things like that.
Of course.
Like,
yeah. And it's not like he means any harm by it, but I can understand your point. I'm just
talking assembly line of making hot tamales and happens like running a train. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do you go to these conferences and do your
so the last thing I went to was back in September. I went for the Violence Against Women's Act.
Mm-hmm.
We did a walk on the National Mall, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
That too, I met a lot of survivors there. And it makes me feel good. It makes me feel where I'm not alone, and I want to help others.
Well, I think you do a great thing for sure.
It doesn't discriminate, brother.
No,
it's all walks of life, and it's just everybody. It doesn't discriminate, and she does a good thing with it, and I'm proud of her.
Yeah, and, it is. It's good, and I was hoping even by doing this, that if there's a young man out there that watches this, and I'm gonna go a different direction with this, but say there may be somebody out there, a young man that's about to make a decision that could change somebody's life in a bad way for the rest of their life, that maybe if he knows how it impacts a human to do some shit like that, he may think twice before making a decision that them guys made. You know what I mean? Yes. So maybe, because seems like a simple decision. You either, excuse my language, you fuck somebody up for life or you don't. Right. And most people are like, oh, well, I just won't do it. But it happens every day. So maybe some young guy or somebody that's got to make that decision one day will see this and remember how it affected you and millions of other women that this happens to.
Some of the impacts are profound.
I can imagine.
Everything from, physical and health problems, anxiety, suicide, ideation,
drug use,
and substance abuse. It's far-reaching.
Well, you've been taken advantage of. It's never a good feeling, and not to equate it to anything that y'all have gone through, but I remember years ago, my house was broken into when I wasn't home. My belongings were rummaged through and stolen. And I remember getting home thinking of just how violated you felt, how angry you felt, how helpless you felt. And I can only imagine that to go through what you and other survivors go through, it's got to be a million times that feeling. Oh, you know what I mean? Yes. Like I said, that's not to compare that to what happened to you, but that's all I can I try to fathom how that must feel to be a victim of that, and you just feel so helpless and so vulnerable. And I mean, what do? You can't reach out and touch the person that did it, as bad as you would want to. And then, so now going back to your parents, to this day, do they?
So one of the good things about hiring the private investigators, one of them was in the Knights of Columbus with my dad. And I said, I don't know how to tell my parents. He felt that because NOPD likely, it's not that they didn't believe me, but it just seemed so baseless, my claim. He said, I feel like we need to tell your parents so that we can get, what do you call that? Where they're outcry witnesses.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Because I just had that one outcry witness, my friend Danelle. They want to hear, that's where they get a lot of their evidence from. So when they do rape cases and they go to trial, the outcry witnesses are often important. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have a whole lot of that. And I feel like that's what the private investigators wanted. They wanted witnesses to say, this is how she came home. So I told my mother, and it was on a Sunday, and it was February of 2019, about a month and a half before I found my perpetrators, where I just said, we were all having dinner and the kids were around. And I said, Mom, would you and Dad remember a night in question when I was growing up? And she went to it right away.
Wow.
She said, you mean the night those boys dropped you off at the corner? And I it wasn't the time or place to talk about it. But that was on a Sunday. And by Wednesday, I got the call from her. And she said, I've been waiting. I've been waiting for you to tell me why you asked me that. And so I did. I told her. We sobbed on the phone. She said, I'm going to tell your daddy. I'm going to bring him to church. So she said, I'm too afraid that he'll have a heart attack or something will go wrong. I want the priest to be there with me. I said, okay. So, that's how intimate my relationship is still with my parents, where, my dad couldn't even hear it from me. She had to be the one to tell him. And so here we were 34 years later, healing together as a family over what happened. So I'm kind of glad that the private investigators encouraged me to tell my parents. I felt bad, like here they are aging, like why do they need to know this now?
Sure.
But it was helpful for them to know.
Well, it's probably helpful all the way around for you also. That's your parents. And you've got, like I said, one of the worst things that ever happened to you, and you can't even tell them, you know what I mean?
And it was tough breaking it to the kids, they're grown kids, and it was still a tough situation. We decided, hey, I think tonight's the night we're going to do it, talk to them. And you could see the despair on their face and the shock and just, they were upset,
So what is your main message to young women that might find, just don't trust people like that, or what
not to trust people, especially in the face of alcohol. Know your boundaries, have your friends, stick with your group, try to feel confident in yourself and not need validation from anyone else. If you don't get that confidence boosting from home, try to find it within yourself.
And it's tough because it starts with your upbringing, but like you said, not everybody has that. So then, you start getting that outside of your house and you start gravitating towards, because everybody likes that feeling, everybody likes to be wanted. They love that validation that I'm somebody,
I mean, I wished I would have been that girl that would have been sipping her daiquiri and seen him peering over his friend's head and went and looked the other way. But that wasn't me.
No.
Yeah.
No. And there's millions of you out there.
I couldn't believe that he was wanting to talk to me. Right. So, yeah.
And I guess I would have to imagine a big piece of advice also would be come forward. I mean, I know it's scary. And
some people can't, for different reasons in their families. You wouldn't believe how many survivors of abuse, grown women that were abused either by a sibling.
I got you.
Or their father. Yeah. And they suffer in silence every day. Mm-hmm. It's really sad.
Damn. Yep. But there is outlets for people, you know what I mean? And that's why I think what you do is very important, to let people know that it can seem scary, but people like you are there. They're there for them. You know what I mean? Reach out to those organizations that and what was STAR was one of them?
STAR, that's locally. And then RAIN
is the nation kind of.
Yeah. Like you can maybe put that number.
I will. I'll put it on the screen for them.
I think I kind of gave you some of that.
I had a packet. Like I said, I didn't want to dive too deep into it because I wanted to get you to tell me, everything that went on. But no, that's great. I was looking at this 90%, 9 out of every 10 victims of rape are female, which doesn't surprise me because men are dogs. You got me hating them right now. I'm about over these men. Is that what these conferences are about when you go to them? Is it just a big?
Well, that's the thing. I can't hate men. Like people talk about toxic masculinity, but I love men. Right. I have my dad, my brother,
sure,
my nephew, my husband, my boys, and now grandson. So I'm not like that.
But there probably are some women who don't have them kind of male figures in their life to where this will turn them sour towards men. So then they can't be in a relationship themselves because they don't trust any man, and it's nothing they can help. It's just the way that they were affected by that mentally. So I imagine that goes on too.
There's other ways that I've found to cope, like I took up painting and I went to YouTube and taught myself how to do some painting, and that too was very cathartic. Therapy, And then I joined a writers group, and we just published a book about survivors, and it's called "We've Been Put Through the Fire and Come Out Divine." And so I have some stories in there, short stories or short writings, and some are narrative. Some people wrote poems, and that too was helpful for me.
It's good to have an outlet.
So even for people who don't feel they want to disclose an upheaval in their life, they can find other outlets like that.
So what you think, it's on a personal, like case by case, like you're not advocating for everybody to come out and just say, hey, I was, if it's not for you, I guess
I'm not advocating for anybody to just, you have to tell. It's when you're ready, and
Well, it goes from heartbreaking to it looks like you're doing some good things with making the best of what happened to you. And I'm sure it's something that you're always going to be dealing with, whether ups and downs. But it looks like you're doing some amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's like
I'm just amazed that you can talk about it.
Aw, thank you, Kristen.
Well, it only took 34 years.
Yeah, it's taken me a while. It's hard to believe that it's been 6-7 years that, since I told I was 52. The night that he came home, and I have all these text messages from Mr. Handsome, and he's like in disbelief, like, oh my God. All he said was, holy shit. He just kept like I had won the lottery, I guess. Like, how many survivors get
it's crazy that
validation from there,
or for them to admit it.
Yes, I've had you in my mind forever. Wow. And I think that meant, well, he also asked how old my son was. And I said, don't even go there. You don't have to worry about that. I think that kind of crosses mine. Like,
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, maybe there was a...
Yeah, because he has 2 daughters.
Sure.
And what did he say? I'm waiting for you to tell me that you have my son.
Huh?
I said, don't go there.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, he said a few other things, but I choose not to say.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Just him admitting it was huge, man, because I figured you take that to your grave, you dirty bastard. But, it's, I guess, something that weighed on his mind, maybe. It's a good thing he had that conscience, I guess, because he didn't have to say. He could have simply said, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
The way I remember you, Angel, he put my name on there. Like, I was like, oh my God, you remember.
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
So, because let's face it, you would have people that would doubt your story if you didn't have proof, because people do that all the time. They don't want to believe the women,
That's
you know
it.
what I mean? That was
Victim
big.
blaming is so huge.
Yeah.
And,
It happens.
And it's not what they're wearing. It's not what the women are wearing. Like, I've heard that too many times. Don't wear that kind of clothes, and
exactly.
And it's like, look, in a perfect world, I guess a woman wouldn't have to think about that. But honestly, it is something that should probably cross a young lady's mind, that maybe I don't want to go out there half naked, even though you're right. But there are evil people in this world.
Sure.
So there's no need to help them, decide their victim, So, that's the only thing I would say. Because I know a lot of people, that's an argument they make. Well, they can wear what they want. And it's like, yeah, you can. Right. But there may be consequences to it that I'd rather you not have to face. So let's just keep that in mind. Young women, I mean, it's, teenagers, they always want to look their best when they're going places. And I mean, sometimes.
Do y'all have a daughter or daughters?
No. All
okay.
boys.
All boys.
Yeah.
Well, I've got them. And this, like I said, these stories really hit home when you start having daughters, because I couldn't imagine. I could imagine what your father would have done had you told him back then.
Yeah, back then.
I mean, he may not be, he may be in prison.
Well, my mother said that. She said, I think you saved your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
I can imagine, because that's the first thing I'd want to do.
That was the other thing they told me when we finally got to talk about it. She said, you don't remember Daddy and I asking you, do we need to bring you to the hospital or the police? And I sobbed.
Yeah.
I said, I don't remember that.
Do you think they knew?
Yeah.
Like, you think they knew back then and just...
Yeah, I think something was up. Like, they knew, and I kept denying it, saying, I'm okay, nothing happened.
Yeah.
And they went with that. And, of course, they regret, not following through.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I wore school skirts at Chappelle, so I had to conceal those. They kept spreading, and I thought, oh my God, somebody is gonna see them.
Oh, the bruises you're talking about? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 Mm.
And I remember thinking, here it is, just months before my graduation. What if I get pregnant? I didn't so much worry about STDs. I don't think that was on my mind. It was the pregnancy thing. And then years later, I went to school to be a surgical tech, and I was at the old charity hospital, and I got stuck with a needle. But when you get stuck, back then it was in the height of the HIV scare, and everything was raw with that, and so you have to go and see the infectious disease lady, and she asks you all these questions. How many people have you slept with in the last so many days or months or whatever? And I remember thinking, I don't know any of their names, so I didn't put anything. Yeah. I remember being angry over that.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
like,
I can imagine. Yeah.
And so I planned my funeral for about a week. It seemed like it took a week for the results to come back.
Yeah.
But it affected me in that way. Like.
No, it changes you, man. Probably in more ways than you even realize, honestly. I mean, I'm sure if you sit down and think about it, you can find some ways, but I'm sure it's.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's got to.
You think about it too, and I know you and I talk off air. Certain shows that are on YouTube, if it's CPP or with pedophiles and stuff, and God, just today with the internet and the whole social media bit, where these young kids. And when I hear these stories of these young kids just being, and they're being lured, they're being groomed. And then it's just to hear and to see what these kids have access to. And it's just like, parents, watch your children.
Sure.
Watch your kids, because it can happen. And like I said, my kids are grown. Your kids are mostly grown. You have a couple of young ones, but now I have grandbabies, man. Yeah. And I look at this whole picture different, being that they're 8 and 7, and it's like they're coming into that. And when I hear these stories, it infuriates me,
sure.
man. It makes me so pissed off that an adult would take advantage of kids or even like her situation. It's just it's disgusting.
Yeah, it blows my mind listening to something like she was talking about, because I could not imagine being in a room and participating in that.
Right.
Let alone, I mean, at least step in and say, hey, what the fuck are y'all doing? But then to participate, like how sick. Right. I'll never understand that. You know what I mean? And it just amazes me. There's people out there like that you can find 3 or 4 assholes that think the same, that this is okay what we're doing in the same room. You know what I mean? You didn't have to go far to find these assholes. Yeah.
Hey, what the F are y'all doing? Dude?
Yeah.
This young girl. No.
There was one black boy in the whole room. And I can still see, as I'm crawling on the floor, I can still see I looked, and he had those black slides, like shower slides.
Gotcha.
With a pair of white tube socks with the red stripe right here. I can still see it, with red shorts on and a muscle shirt, like a wife beater shirt. And he had this look like, you poor thing. Like, to me, that's the look that he gave me. Like, I'm too stupid to say anything.
Right. But he knew.
And this happened to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he was just, he was not there to participate, I don't think.
Right. Well, and that's a big thing too, is just people that, convincing people to stand up and stop something like that, which is a tough thing to do, because everybody wants to fit in. You see a group of your buddies doing some stupid shit like that. Even if you don't participate, it's hard for a lot of people to say, hey, y'all stop. Because now you're the outcast in the group. But man, people got to,
if they only knew the aftermath. And it could be their sister. It could be their girlfriends. It could be their wives one day that they're hearing about her story, that something happened. And it's up to men, to be, or anybody, to just say, if you see something, say something.
Yeah. No, it's like you said, if everybody would just put their loved ones in that position and say, I want this happening to, like you said, my sister, my mom, my aunt, my whatever. And of course it would be like, well, hell no, I wouldn't want this. Absolutely. So let me at least try to intervene. I mean, I know you can't physically take on everybody in the world, but there's something you can do. He could have ran out the room and got help.
Forever. You know what I'm saying? Once that's done, it's forever for the victim.
Yeah, and
it never just goes away. You don't wake up one morning and say, well, I'm better. You just always deal with that.
No, and like I said, that was a big part of what I was hoping to get across, is how it affects people. And maybe somebody may have a conscience and say, I don't want to do that to anybody. Now there's going to be assholes out there that don't care. But if you can prevent one case from happening, then hey,
we've succeeded.
Yeah, and if daddies really adored and showed their daughter a lot of adornment and confidence building, I think that goes a long way for a lot of women.
Sure.
A lot of girls.
I can imagine.
When their daddy is in their life in that way.
Yeah, because I never even thought about it like that till you mentioned it. But I can see that having an effect on what happens to you out in public. You know what I mean? When people start giving you attention and, it's
and it starts like at a young age, because I remember being 5 and I rode a big school bus, and my aunt, I stayed at her house while my mom and dad worked, and every day I would get off the steps, the long steps of the bus with these little bitty skinny legs, and my cousins, they were all older than me, and they were supposed to be there to pick me up.
Right.
Well, one day they weren't, and I went the wrong way. And so here I am, 5 years old, carrying my little book bag, going the wrong way, and ended up, I was crying, and this man was outside cutting his lawn with all of his kids, and he had me come inside. He called the police department, Kenner Police, and so when the policeman got there, I remember sitting in the back seat trying to tell him, describe my aunt's house. Well, they were all outside. My aunts, the neighbors, my cousins, crying. And my mom, I guess to protect my aunt and the girls who were supposed to be there,
Sure.
she chose not to tell my dad. So I'm 5, we walk in the door, and my dad said nothing to me. And for a little girl that's 5 years old, it taught me that it's okay to keep secrets. Like, he doesn't want to talk to me about it. So I learned at 5 years old not to talk to my dad about anything. That was because I felt like it was my fault. Like, I went the wrong way.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I was a goofy, uncoordinated little kid. And, and that's why the girls came and met me every day and would walk me back home. But anyway.
It's amazing what shapes your mind at the ages. And a lot of people don't take that into account, with the kids.
Yeah. So anyway.
Wow. Yeah. So did you get in shit for getting home late that night? I mean, were your parents like, where in that?
I was punished.
I was just curious.
Definitely. I had to endure the punishment, but there was no greater punishment.
Well, no, I mean,
than what I was going
through. Went through, but they don't know at the time. So they're punishing your ass for being late.
Oh, yeah.
Wanting to know where the hell you
drive my car. Yeah, I was definitely punished.
Yeah, so now you got that, and then you can't tell them why you were late,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, all right. Well, let's wrap it up.
Thank
Again,
you,
no, I appreciate you telling your story. I know you've told it before, but just to be able to come sit down and do that for me, I appreciate it. Because I'm hoping we can spread the word. And it is all of April is
all of April is
Sexual
Assault Awareness Month.
Right.
I think they're celebrating on and there's different days. If like you go to the website, Sexual Assault Awareness Month or RAIN, it'll tell you all the different. There's a denim day where everybody wears denim.
Take us out with something inspirational. What you got?
A quote from John Mark Green, who has a different take than Rowling's quote about light. He said, "You are not the darkness you endured. You are the light that refused to surrender." And that is how I see myself now. I'm not just a survivor, but a light.
I love it.
That's beautiful.
Let's end with that. I love it. Amazing story. You're doing a great thing.
Thank you.
And I know you're going to keep it going. And hopefully, like we said in the beginning, this can help. I mean, hopefully tons of people, but if it's
at
just
least
one,
touch somebody.
It was great.
Yeah, well, I commend you for doing it.
Well, we're trying. Like I said, we're usually here goofing off, but sometimes there are some serious things that need to be discussed, and this is one of them. And just getting somebody like yourself that's willing to do it, like Kristen just mentioned, to even be able to talk about it is it's amazing. Let's wrap it up. I want to thank everybody out there for checking it out. This is B.S.ing with the guys, and until next time, y'all be good.